I was the head of a logging product at one of the large observability companies. Our customers would send us tons and tons of data, and so I wanted to give them control over that data. Now, observability is the second most expensive part of running software on the internet. And observability is growing 30% year on year. But the value that you get out of observability isn't growing by that same amount. Worse than that, these vendors control the collection and harvest of the data that they're charging you for. So you don't even have control over this. Something's amiss, and we wanted to do something about it. Taking something from running on your laptop and moving it into the open internet is an extremely difficult problem. I worked at companies where they didn't know they're having an outage until a board member called up the CEO and said, "Your website's down." If we all used the same software, it'd be super easy. But that's not how the world works. And so monitoring that, making sure it's behaving the way that you expect, that takes custom instrumentation, and that takes a whole bunch of different signals. All of those signals, that adds up to a whole bunch of data. Logging, metrics, and traces are the signals that we collect in the observability space. These are from the outside, from the inside, and aggregated over time. One of the common pitfalls is people don't really have a strategy when it comes to that data. We're highly encouraged to capture it all. You never know when you're going to need it. Vendors charge you for hot storage, for hot query and hot compute. But these what if scenarios, they're once in a while. So without a strategy on what data that you're collecting, where it's being stored and how you're querying it, the costs of this data spirals out of control. Firstly, let's start with APM, or application performance monitoring. The way that APM works is you install an agent or a library inside of your application. By default, this agent goes and collects a whole bunch of default telemetry. This is things like how your framework is behaving, request response life cycles, number of database requests. You add custom instrumentation over the top of that gives you this visibility into the critical paths inside of your application. When you have custom and default instrumentation, you get this beautiful picture of what's happening inside of your application. But here's the catch. Those agents are all vendor lock-in, which means if you go and install vendor A and do all of this custom instrumentation, you can't just replace that library with a completely different vendor. All the calls are completely different. So this is usually a multi-month process to unwind that custom instrumentation and then re-implement it with a new vendor. The kicker here is these vendors control the harvesting and collection of the data, so you really have no control over the frequency or volume of data that's being sent to these vendors. Now, on the other data types, you've got log data and metric data. Here we have actual controls over what we collect and send to vendors, but there's a different problem at play. Often the people who are going and creating log lines and metric endpoints and collecting that data are not the people who are using the data to solve problems, and they're not the people who are responsible for paying the bills. So when it comes time to true up a bill or reduce data volume, it actually becomes really complex in order to find out what data can we drop, what's being used and what isn't. And the vendors really don't make this easier for you. They could, but they don't. You end up with this really complex problem of, we have a bunch of data, I don't know what's useful and I don't know what's not, and I don't know who to talk to in order to pare this back. When you talk to the vendors about this, they want you to send as much data as possible. But they all take this position of, listen, we don't know what's important to your business. Maybe something bizarre happens, maybe some one-off event happens. So if you collect it all and capture it all, you can always go back and query it later. You've got all of this historical data, you've got this what if, this fear-based scenario that really prevents people from moving from one vendor to another. Well, what if I get audited? What if there was a hack? So you have this multi-layer approach of visibility, which you need, but this multi-layer of lock-in that makes it really tricky to pare down that data that's being collected and sent, as well as allowing you to move vendors. When customers use Datable, they end up saving around 50% on their observability bill, because they're able to make decisions around what data is worthwhile and what's being dropped. We let you see the data that's leaving your application, your infrastructure, and going to these vendors. We surface all of that information and let you make decisions about what you drop, what you route, what you plex out to multiple different places. Because we're able to help you enrich the data that you're sending to the vendors, you get more out of those vendors. So we complement your observability vendors by being a pipeline and letting you get more value out of the tools that you use to get your job done. We've had log data since the dawn of computing. And with all good things in computer science, we have 12,000 different standards of how to treat log data. This could be semi-structured, like syslog or Nginx access logs. This could be JSON logging. It could be logs from a vendor like AWS, or it could be whatever one of your devs woke up at 2 a.m. and used puts-driven development to go and understand why there was an outage. All of this informs your observability story because all of it puts together a picture of what's happening within your architecture and your ecosystem. So at Datable, we believe that all of this data is really important. And it doesn't matter if it's log data or if it's trace data, we treat everything as an event. At the end of the day, traces or spans, they're just fancy logs. So we take all of that data in, and everything is treated as an event. It represents a thing that happened at a moment in time. We take that data in and we normalize it into the open telemetry standard. Now you have a single normalized playing field to go and look at all of your data, no matter where it came from, and understand the trends, if things need to be tagged differently, and form a schema of how your data should be treated. And having your data normalized means that it doesn't matter if it's coming from Syslog, if it's coming from AWS, or if it's coming from your own application. You can normalize that and make sure user ID is the same in all of the places. We believe that all of this data is really important, and it doesn't matter if it's coming from a vendor or your own infrastructure, it all informs that picture. So we support additional formats, not just Syslog, JSON, HTTP, Fluent, but we also support things like the open source vendor protocols out there, like the New Relic Wire protocol and the Datable Wire protocol. Because we normalize all of this data, it also makes it really easy for us to go and send the data out to third-party vendors. You need to go and send this out into the Splunk or New Relic or Datadog format. Not a problem. We take it from that open telemetry format, able to transform it into their API and send it on its way. We really want you to be able to do more with your data. That's the drive behind our company. And we've approached this by letting anyone come and build custom JavaScript that transforms their business events in real time. Now, what we've learned is not everyone likes writing JavaScript. So we've gone and built a no-code experience. Anyone can come in, a product manager, a business intelligence person, and with a couple clicks be able to transform, enrich, and route their data to any destination. Not all pipelines are created equal, but we want everyone to have a chance at going and creating them. We want to make sure that SREs building their pipelines, that data is protected. It is guaranteed. It's always going to end up where it needs to go because that's making sure the business works. But a PM coming in should be able to build a pipeline, should be able to peel out the data that they care about, and have role-based access control ensure that when you go and build a pipeline and lock it in, nobody else is going to come in there and modify that data. So our customers tell us about 3 different ways that we're helping them. First and foremost, cost savings. We speak the wire protocol of all of these big observability vendors. So customers that are using one of these big players at the moment, they're able to implement Datable without any interruption in service. Now using us, we can send data to multiple different places. It's like S3. So you can send all of your data to S3 as a backup, as an auditory requirement, and only the data that you care about to these premium vendors. We hear a lot about this. Because we sit between your data source and data destination and normalize all of that data so you can explore it, we have people telling us about how they're going to put schema normalization rules in place. This means no more inconsistencies around user underscore ID versus user ID. This means that everything always has a service name, a host name, team name. All that data tagged all of the time means that when it ends up in a destination, you're able to find it faster. And then lastly, our customers tell us about filtering and sampling benefits. So my favorite story here is one of our customers used our really robust state management to go and put tail-based sampling in place around their trace data. Now we're able to say, hey, if this is a free customer, we don't really care about that data so much, let's tone it back. If it's a paid customer, we want to get more visibility into what that user experience looks like. Let's send more of that data through. So using our state management, able to put real sophisticated rules in place around their business and their business logic. So my favorite customer success story is a company called Crystal Knows. They were using product when they first started talking to us. They weren't really happy with how much they were spending on it. They felt like they weren't getting value out of the product. Crystal Knows had very specific needs and they had a very specific plan in mind. So they implemented Datable and we let them peel off their data and send it to multiple different vendors. So they're able to do an in-place bake-off and try all of these new modern observability vendors and be able to compare which one suited their needs best. They ended up picking Signos, which is an open source, more modern technology stack, the managed version of it. They were able to save themselves a whole bunch of money. In addition to that, using Datable, they were able to inspect the data that they are sending and take control of that. Looking at the data, they were able to drop low value data, as well as enrich and inform some standards around the structure of the data, making sure tags are present no matter where the data source came from. So we had a minimal to no engineering lift to do a bake-off and churn, and then understanding and enriching data. All in all, it took them a week and they saved about 50% of their vendor bill, which is pretty amazing. So you're struggling with your observability costs. I mean, who isn't? It's currently the second most expensive part of running a business on the internet, right after your infrastructure costs. But it doesn't have to be that way. That's where Datable comes in. We sit between your data source and your data destination, and we let you make decisions about your data. That could be as simple as, I want to store everything in S3 and only send a small slither through to my vendors. Or it could be doing an in-place bake-off, where you side by side your current vendor versus newer vendors that are more tailored to what your needs. What I'm saying here is, by using Datable, you have options to take control of your data. And that's pretty exciting.